Hello and welcome to the third lesson in my Android Development Fundamentals series. In this lesson we're going to be going over how to work with XML layouts and how to work with the XML editor in Eclipse to end up making some really nice XML layouts which you can later use in your Android applications. So I first want to discuss why we use XML and why we don't just do everything programmatically, and then from there I want to jump into an overview of the Eclipse XML editor so you can build your comfortability with the tool, and then I want to wrap up by creating a simple user interface which you can then extend into more advanced UIs in your future applications. Without any further delay, let's jump into why we use XML and why we use it when we're developing Android applications. And the reason is that when you have your XML files and your Java code, your XML files are defining how the application looks. It keeps everything in a standard separate area, and the Java code is where you define the functionality of your application. And it's nice to have these separated and not intertwined, just so that you can make tweaks to the way your application looks without really messing with any of the logic of your application. So it's just a good practice to keep them separated. Additionally, when you have the XML files separated like this, you're able to dynamically at runtime select different XML files to use based on the device specifications, meaning if it's a smaller screen or if it's even in landscape mode, or the locale that the user's in. So you can select XML files representing strings in a different language based on the user's language preferences. And of course, this is kind of trivial because you could always just implement this on your own. So the short answer is we use XML because it's easier to design layouts and it's easier to maintain the standards across our application by using XML layouts. So now that we know this, I want to jump into an activity in Eclipse where we're actually going to be going over the interface we're going to be using to create these XML layouts. So once again, here in Eclipse we have our first app application, which we made in the previous episode, and I've went ahead and made this main.xml file which we're going to be using to demonstrate the functionality of the Eclipse XML editor. But before we do that, I want to quickly go over the file hierarchy over here on the right. Now we have our application, or our first app, in the Package Explorer here. We also have a source file where we're going to be creating any Java files that are going to be linked to the XML files. But the important file that we're going to be, or the important folder we're going to be working with in this episode is the resources file. Now here we have various subfolders. The one that is going to contain the layout files for our application is called layout, and I have main.xml here, the one we're going to be editing. These all get created for you automatically when you create the Eclipse project, and it's good that they do because these names have to be exactly the way they are in order for them to work while you're developing your application. So we have our layout files in the layout folder. We also have this drawable folder which is going to be used to hold all the images that you're going to be using in your XML files. I placed everything in HDPI for now. We'll go over later the differences between HDPI, MDPI, and XHDPI. But for now, just know that I've pre-created some images and I'll put them in there for use in our application. So let's now maximize the XML editor. And once again, the first thing you'll notice is this main screen. This is where we get to see what our application looks like on a variety of devices. We can also drag icons onto this area here to add them to our XML file. And we also have the palette screen on the left over here. This is where we can choose from a variety of topics for the views that we can add to our XML layout and simply drag them into the main pane here. Then of course we have the outline and properties pane over here. The outline just represents your XML in a much more friendly way so you can easily inspect it. But the properties pane down here is actually really useful. This is where we get to modify the fields associated with the views that are in our XML layout from this graphical editor up front. So if I was to pull an image view over here and just drop it in the middle, let's just say IC Launcher for now, you can see that these fields populate and we can modify the source and just change any of the properties that we'll need to. But we'll delete this for now. Now we also have down here this ability to switch to the raw XML view of our application, or of the XML file, sorry. so we can see the XML that's actually being used to render this layout and modify it if we need to. And we're going to go through both of these in the demonstration here, but it's important to note that this is exactly the same. It represents the exact same layout that's being created in this graphical editor here. Finally, we have the toolbar up here, which we can use to switch the device that we're displaying in the XML editor. We just changed it to Nexus 7 there. We can also modify the orientation of our layout to see what the application would look like if the device was to be turned on its side. Let's turn that back there. We can also modify the theme of the application, which is how all the elements look in the application. It's just a standard, but it's quite complicated. I'm actually going to do a complete separate video going over the themes and how they relate to XML files. And of course we can change the API levels that's being rendered, and there's a whole bunch of additional features up here that we can use to manipulate the view that we're seeing down here. But first, all these different buttons, they will likely seem kind of intimidating. There's a whole bunch of different functionality in each of these panes here, and the best way to build your comfortability with them is just to use them. So let's do just that. I'd now like to jump into creating a simple UI where we're going to make this basic white screen turn into something beautiful, something that we would consider using in an application. As we're introducing the XML editor and how to work with XML, let's keep it really simple for now, and we'll build upon this in future episodes. Let's start simply by dragging an image view from the palette on the left here right into the center of the screen. As you see, when you let go, Eclipse will ask you to choose which resource you want to pick. Since I've already placed a few images in the drawable folder, I'm going to click the demo logo here, and we'll see that it becomes the image that we selected. And you'll see as soon as you do that, the Properties tab here populates with all the relevant information about this view that we've just placed on the layout here. And you see we have the source here, we have layout parameters, the width and height. We can adjust that all from this Properties pane here, or we can do it from the main XML file itself. And that's what I'd like to do to introduce you to the XML. Here in the XML hierarchy, you'll see that our image view has already been placed in here for us, and it's within the relative layout, which is the parent view in this XML layout. Now the parent view in Android is typically always a layout because it's within that parent layout that we have to specify the positions of all the child views, the image views, the text views, everything that's going to be contained on the layout, which is this whole space here, is specified underneath the parent element. Now we also have a series of attributes for each of these XML elements here. We have relative layouts, layout width and layout height, and a whole bunch for image view. The layout width and height, which are apparent in both of these views here, specify the dimensions of the view itself, which is separate from the content that the view is displaying. Now the match parent values that are placed in the layout width and height here simply specify to the parent container, the parent layout there, relative layout, that we want to cover all of the space, all of the width and all of the height. Now in the image view down here, we have wrap content for the width and height. That wraps the content specified by this source variable down here. Now the content of the image view is an image. So this is just saying that we want the view itself to have this exact same dimensions as the image that this image view is representing. For the image view, we also have some additional attributes which are used to define the location of the view. We have center horizontal and center vertical both set to true here, which tell the relative layout where to put this view inside it. And of course we're centering horizontally and vertically right in the middle of the layout there. As I begin to modify the code here in this XML file, I'm going to be using a lot of Eclipse's contextual autocomplete, which is really just a tool within Eclipse to speed up your development process by filling in text, which is kind of obvious, text that it knows you're going to place there. So for example, if I hit Control Space here, we have a series of attributes that we can add in. Let's add the Android specifier here. We want to change the background of this relative layout so that it looks more so that we can customize the way it looks. So we'll type back, and you'll see we have background there. We'll hit enter. And we want to specify the drawable that we have in our drawable resource folder. So we'll hit control space again. We want @drawable, and if we hit control space again, Eclipse will show us all the drawables that we have in that folder. We have demo background, which is the one we want to use, and if we save it and go back into the graphical layout, you'll see that we have the nice honeycomb background on the XML layout just behind the logo for AcademiCode there. So we've made a simple UI here, a very basic, what could be considered a splash screen, which we can use in our applications going forward. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. I really hope that this lesson was enough to kind of explain the ins and outs of XML layouts. We're going to be using them substantially in future lessons. Speaking of the future lessons, our next one is, as I said previously, going to be on understanding Android activities. So we're going to be making some activities, understanding the activity lifecycle, and this is going to be quite an important lesson because it's going to be something we're using extensively when making any kind of Android application. And again, I'd like to thank you for watching. If you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments section below. If you liked the video, feel free to like it, and if you would like to see some more content, feel free to subscribe. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.